Good evening, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV, and what is a slightly impromptu episode, given the news a couple of hours ago that Gillingham have parted company with their manager Mark Bonner, which means that we are now looking for a fourth permanent gaffer in the 2 years that the Gallinsons have been in charge. Firstly, Neil Harris, then Stephen Clements, and now, of course, Bonner himself have all been relieved of their duties since the Gallinsons took over in December 2022. Mark leaves the club with a league record of played 23, won 9, drew 3, lost 11, scored 22, conceded 24, points 30 at an average of 1.3 per game, which, comparing to previous managers, was exactly the same as his predecessor, Stephen Clements. But I think it's probably been the last 2 months, in truth, that have seen the axe ultimately fall on Bonner. It's been a dreadful 8 weeks, let's be honest, after what was a really solid start to the season. If you look from the beginning of October up until now, which is Sunday, the 5th of January, we've played 15 games in the league. We've won just 3, drawn just 3, and lost 9, which is a paltry 11 points from those 15 fixtures at 0.73 points per game. In that time, we've only scored 10 times, so well under a goal a game, and we've conceded 22. So everything that we were doing correctly at the start of the campaign in terms of scoring at one end and remaining tight at the other, we've been doing completely the opposite. If you look in that period of games, we've had losing streaks of both 3 games and 5 games. And from them 8 fixtures, there's been 6 blanks. So lots of problems that Mark ultimately couldn't rectify. And in what is a results-driven business, the modern game, it is not really that surprising that a change has been made. Yeah, it's disappointing, isn't it? Because if you look at that start to the season, in the first 8 fixtures from August to the end of September, we played 8, we won 6, drew 1, just lost once. We scored 12 times and conceded just the twice. So there were 6 clean sheets in that opening 2 months of the season. And we had 19 points at 2.37 per game as we sat top of League 2. And everything was right with the world. The sun was shining, and we thought that a promotion push was really on the cards. I think if you say on top of that as well, like Mark, unfortunately, his team selections, his substitutions, his setups have been a little bit confusing over the last month or two. I think that's certainly the work of a man whose head was a bit scrambled. He was almost, to me at least, it looked like he was hoping to fall upon a system or a style of play, because we were promised that we were going to be attacking and front foot, and we were going to be a team that would run forwards and create chances and score goals. And for whatever reason, that's just not materialised again, has it? Like we say, 22 goals in 23 matches. It's an age-old problem, and again, it's one that Mark couldn't rectify. It's a problem that predates him. I've said that plenty of times. Stephen Clements, I think, averaged around a goal a game in the league. Neil Harris, under a goal a game in the league over his entire reign. I think it was just over. Just thinking back to the article that I wrote recently, just over after the Gallinsons takeover. But it's not a new problem. Probably goes even back to Steve Evans in the relegation season in 21-22. But yeah, I know injuries have not helped, certainly at the start of the season, but we were winning football matches then, and it seems to have become more of an issue since we've had a bigger squad to choose from, and Mark's not got a settled 11. There's been no plan, has there? And let's be honest, that performance or non-performance against Bromley on the 2nd of January was, for me, as bad as anything I've seen, certainly at home, since that 7-2 hammering under Steve Lovell against Oxford United back in January 2022, when we ultimately got relegated out of the division above. Is it all on Mark? Absolutely not. I think this group of players have not helped him at all, as much as he's not helped himself. If you look at the squad, again, I'll refer back to the article that I wrote a few days ago. 12 of this group, that's Glenn Morris, Max Clark, Connor Masterson, Max Emer, Ethan Coleman, Johnny Williams, Ollie Hawkins, Robbie McKenzie, Jaden Clark, Shad Ogie, Jake Turner and Timothy Dieng have all played under all 3 managers since the Gallinsons came into power, and they've all played differing roles in the sacking now of 3 permanent managers in a little over 18 months. It's not a good look, is it? Let's be honest. We don't want to be that football club. We don't want to become Watford. That's been the name that's been mentioned a few times. But we are going down that way, and it seems that maybe the more desperate we get to get promoted out of the division, the more panicked we become, unfortunately, but only the owners and the directors can answer them types of questions. Ultimately, it falls on Brad and Shannon for me, and managing director Joe Comper. They're the people that are paid the money to make the big decisions, and unfortunately, it's something that they've got really wrong more than once in a relatively short space of time. Yeah, but like I say, back to the players. There's been question marks over them in terms of mentality, leadership, a willingness to really play for the badge and run through brick walls for the team, because we all know what Gillingham football team is all about: hard working. We might not always have the best players, the most technically gifted, but we've always had players when we've been successful that are willing to go that extra yard, go that extra mile, and really play for the badge. At the moment, I think there's probably an accusation that too many are playing for the name on the back of the shirt rather than that badge on the front. And I think that's justifiable amongst the fan base as well. And another sacking for another manager is only going to add fuel to that fire. Let's be honest, that Bromley performance was absolutely despicable. Forget tactics and systems for a minute. Like, that was schoolboy stuff, like stuff that you'd be, upset with children doing. First goal is really, really poor, isn't it? They get in down our left-hand side too easily. The second goal's just an absolute embarrassment. 2 or 3 times our defenders just head it up in the air, look at each other, don't take responsibility. You've got a little bloke in the 6-yard area, out-muscles a bloke twice his size to hook it in past Glenn Morris, and then you're looking for your leaders, your captains, to sort of cajole and maybe give a rollicking to people. Don't get any of it. Just walk back to the halfway line, adjust your socks, tie your boots up, and keep making the same mistakes. Third goal, we switch off. It was just listless, wasn't it? And that's probably the most polite way. Like I say, despicable is a word I've used. But mentality-wise, they're just incapable, this group of players, of going more than a handful of games unbeaten. I've just done a bit of research, and if you go back to Neil Harris, after the takeover, so from January 2023, twice we managed 4-match unbeaten runs under Neil. That was Hartlepool, Colchester, Swindon and Crawley, right at the beginning of the Gallinsons' reign. And then at the start of 23-24, we beat Stockport, Accrington, Sutton and Crawley by 1-0 in each of them 4 fixtures. Same under Stephen Clements, 4 matches just on 1 occasion: Sutton, Colchester, Accrington and Forest Green Rovers, as 23 turned into 2024. And 4 games under Mark Bonner at the start of this season: Carlisle, Morecambe, Fleetwood and Chesterfield. You don't get promoted, you don't be successful if you can only string that amount of games together unbeaten. And the biggest concern for me with this group of players is if they then do lose a game, they're incapable of turning it around. We beat Barrow this season on the 28th of September and went top of the league. We then lost to Grimsby on the Tuesday night. OK, it was one of them nights. They done to us what Notts County had done. We'd done to Notts County a couple of weeks previous. But 1 defeat turned into 2, 2 into 3, 3 into 4, 4 into 5, and then there was a losing draw at Swindon. It's happened again. 3 games unbeaten against Salford, MK Dons and Cheltenham just before Christmas, and we think that the corner's been turned. And then what happens? 3 games we don't score. Been horrific in all 3 of them, haven't we? 2-0 at Colchester on Boxing Day. Offered hardly anything against Wimbledon at the turn of the year, and then that harrowing non-display against Bromley, which ultimately sealed the fate of another gaffer. And then another stat that doesn't help anyone out, the manager or the players. We've gone behind in league games in 2024-5 on 8 occasions, conceded the first goal. We have taken 0 points from them 8 games. So we have an inability to fight back. I think if you look at all games, the only occasion where we've been behind and got something from a league fixture this season was Cheltenham, where we went 1-0 up, then trailed 2-1 and came back to draw 2-2 before Bradley Dack unfortunately hit the crossbar, which would have been, I think the roof would have come off the Rainham. But when you're not playing well, everything conspires to go against you. But did we deserve to win the football match? I'm not entirely sure. So there's plenty of question marks over this playing group as well as the manager. And as I say, I don't think he's totally to blame, Mark Bonner, because if you're picking from a group of players that maybe don't care, it doesn't matter who you pick and it doesn't matter what system you put them into. But that's not all of them. I think there are plenty that do care. But I think it's a sad state of affairs when you've got too many that just seemingly are there and happy to pick up their pay packet at the end of each week, because that's not what this football club's about, never has been. Like I've alluded to, when we're successful, we have proper footballers who are willing to do all they can to roll their sleeves up, to dig in, to battle, put their bodies on the line and fight for this football team, which we've not seen enough of in recent weeks. Gills obviously didn't take too long in appointing a replacement. It's a short-term deal until the end of the season, which I suppose is low risk in the sense that if it works, we can look at extending the contract. If it doesn't, then we say thanks very much for helping us out, and both parties move on and go their separate ways. But the man in charge is John Coleman, and he will be ably assisted, we hope, by his trusted Lieutenant Jimmy Bell. Obviously, anyone who has an affiliation to Accrington Stanley will know all about John and Jimmy. John has managed 1,098 games for that football club, 436 wins at 40% win ratio, which is not to be sniffed at. He was in charge as they made their way up through the leagues at the turn of the millennium, and then came back and spent another 10 years in charge. Yeah, so 2 spells, essentially, both over 500 fixtures, which is mental, quite frankly, in the modern game. You don't get managers hanging around for that long. Let's just hope he can have as big an impact or close to it in his short time with us, if it is only a short time, because he's a bona fide legend at Accrington Stanley. Helped them through the leagues, and then that culminated in the 2017-18 season when they won the League Two title with a record of played 46, won 29, drew 6, lost 11, same amount of games we've lost already. Scored 76 goals, notably, only conceded 46, and took 93 points at just over 2 per game, which is a fabulous effort. In terms of style, I mean, I can only go off what I've seen from my teams, watching him and just being a general fan of lower league football. I think it'd be fairly direct. I'm not sure it'd be pretty and easy on the eye. I think it'd be fairly old school in the approach. I think we'll get the ball up to our forward players as quickly as we can and play from there. Will he suffer falls gladly? I don't think so. Will that help this playing group? Or will it help us fans at least watching this playing group? Because I think it's fair to say amongst the fan base at the moment that this playing group are pretty unlikable, which is sad to say. No one wants to watch a football team that they don't even like and don't even care for, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, so to speak. Hopefully, if these players need an old-fashioned rollicking, then John Coleman and Jimmy will be the people to give it to them, and it might just be the shot in the arm that we need to get the maximum out of this group, because we're not. Mark's not, Stephen hasn't, Neil hasn't. It just feels like, sadly, that we've lurched from one disaster to the other. Everyone knows my thoughts on previous managers, so I'm not going to go over old ground. They've all had their flaws, but there are 12 common denominators, and they are people that we trust to go over the white line on a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday or a Wednesday night or a Thursday or a Monday, if you're looking at the festive fixtures. So I think they all need to have a long, hard look in the mirror. It's not the first time I've said that this season. I think there's plenty that have been way below par, certainly in terms of application and all the things that we associate with Gillingham football teams. Like I said, it's low risk in the sense that if it doesn't work, we can just say thanks at the end of the season. But it's high risk in the sense that we're now becoming that type of football club that goes through managers fairly readily. Neil Harris lasted 10 months after the Gallintons took over. Stephen lasted 6. Mark's lasted 7. So it's not much of a lifespan or a shelf life. But all we can do is get behind John and Jimmy and the players, like we always will do, and hope that things turn. Other than that, there's not much more to say, is there? It's just highly frustrating that for all the good work that's been done off the pitch in the last 2 years, the stuff on the pitch is miles off it, and I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered by those higher up the food chain in terms of Joe Comper, Brad and Shannon themselves, because they can't keep getting appointments wrong. They can't keep taking this shotgun approach and replacing managers after 6-7 months. It'll get to the point where people won't want to take a job with our football club, which would be really, really sad. But that's probably a question for another day. Hopefully we'll get something from the new manager, John himself, from the official club channels, and maybe something from Joe Comper as well in terms of an explanation of to why this decision's been made and how they got to it. But until then, as always, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you listening. Please continue to hit that like button. Please continue to subscribe. It is free to do so. Like I say, we're very close to 3,500 subscribers now, so if we can get there really quickly, that would be great. schedule returns to normal, hopefully, he says, fingers crossed, this week, as match previews return after the festive period. So, yeah, we'll be sitting down, hopefully, with a Fleetwood fan middle of the week. And, of course, we'll be at the Priestfield for a match day live on Saturday as we take on Fleetwood Town in a next Sky Bet League 2 encounter. But until then, I hope you've had an all right weekend. It was meant to be a quiet one with no fixture, but that's never the way with our football club, is it? Anyway, enjoy your week. We'll see you soon. And up the Gills.